All right, we've got a lot to dive into in the next 30 minutes, so we're going to introduce ourselves really quickly, and then we'll jump right into this discussion on streaming and sports betting. I am Ashley Rodriguez. I'm a media editor at Business Insider. Adam?
I'm Adam Kaplan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at SportsGrid, which is the first and only sports wagering and lifestyle network with a distribution footprint focused on OTT and streaming and connected device platforms.
Hi, I'm Andy Rogers. I'm the CEO and founder of Rokker. We're a business design consultancy that works extensively in the gaming industry.
I'm Justin Dellario. I'm the Managing Director for Esports at Entain and CEO of Unikrn.
Hi, Patrick Keane, CEO of Action Network. We aim to provide the best sports media content and technology and products for sports bettors here in the US and Canada.
Andy, since you work with a lot of different players in this space, maybe you can help us frame this conversation to start. There's been a lot of opportunity and a lot of excitement around the potential for streaming and sports betting, thinking about the ultimate vision for a true watch and bet experience where you can, watch a game and bet seamlessly within the same platform. There's also a lot of challenges, right? Issues like latency and whatnot. Where are we today in that process, and why is streaming such an important component for the sports betting industry overall?
Well, it's we're some way down the line, obviously. There's some really good examples of streaming and sports betting overlapping and happening at the same time. There's been some interesting questions from the room earlier on about where do we sit with that particular technology and that particular situation right now. We're reasonably well advanced, but we haven't reached the nirvana there by any means. We're a long way off the possible opportunities there. And the reason that people are doing this is obviously, it's either acquisition or retention. It's part of that experience, and people talk about the experience of gaming and it being entertainment, and that's part of it. And obviously the streaming element adds a really big component of that entertainment piece. So that's what where we are at the moment is people trying to figure out the balance of product versus content, and where that needs to overlap. And one doesn't need to get in the way of another one. We want them to be complementary, but we've got a way to go yet. And I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that. So.
Yeah, so there's around this time last year, there was sort of a lot of conversation around what is ESPN going to do? Are they going to license their brand for a sports book? What is Amazon going to do? Are they going to start getting into the business of taking bets? And I'm curious, with the sort of shift in investor sentiment around the industry that we've seen lately and the uncertainty surrounding the economy, how have you all on the stage sort of seen the appetite for big media and tech to do more with sports betting and their streaming services? How has that shifted, or how have those conversations changed in the last year or so?
I'll say from the Action side, I've been frankly shocked that the media companies haven't invested more. Their philosophy is take 9-figure check from sportsbook X, and that is the philosophy. And maybe that's going to work. Maybe that'll work over time. But I think this industry is far too large and too big of a strategic opportunity for rights holders, leagues, and teams not to invest more than just having name rights or sponsor rights. I just think the opportunity is so vast. A year ago we had New York, which by several orders of magnitude is the largest market in the US, has challenges with taxation and lots of other issues, but our Ohio launch was massive. If you look at our business, we drive a lot of conversion for sportsbooks pretty economically. And if Ohio is any indication, and we'll see what happens with Massachusetts, which will be a little more restrictive in a few weeks, but these new states and these new launches, we're now at only 23 states in the US with mobile online betting, and that will get to 30 before we know it, 40 before we know it. So the media companies are taking a little bit of wait and see approach, but I would not wait. The opportunity is here, and I'd invest now.
Yeah, we've seen some really big media markets, as you point out, New York, come online recently, and those that aren't yet online are definitely having those conversations. Is that the same sort of, or I guess, are all of you sort of seeing the same sort of impact?
Well, I think from the SportsGrid side, speaking to your question about kind of the high tech and media players, on our end, we recently announced our global distribution partnership with Amazon. I think we're really excited about the possibility of bringing the sports betting network to bettors globally. We launched in the US and Canada around the Super Bowl, but there are plans for us to take the network globally, as mentioned. Obviously interesting to see what YouTube and YouTube TV do with the Sunday ticket rights, and I think you are seeing some of these high-tech, industry, known names investing in sports, and part of it is, to get into, commercializing betting, as Patrick was alluding to, and just doing a little more for their partners.
Yeah, I think also you have to look at what we mean by media companies. You've got those that have grown up digitally native, and they're probably better, and they're probably better placed to do something. Obviously the likes of YouTube and those businesses. But then you've also got old school media, the newspapers and those things. And I've worked with lots of those older, the TV companies or the newspaper groups, and they struggle, frankly, to launch this kind of product. So I'm not surprised they haven't, gone all in here. They struggle to run complex products like this, and especially in the US, where you're not just dealing with one blanket, regulation or technology. You have to do it for every state that you're going into. That just adds this layer of complexity as well that they're just not prepared, or prepared for or set up to deal with. The digital guys may be a little bit better, so I imagine there'd be more movement there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, we've been talking mainly from the media perspective of this, right? How are we seeing sports books and operators shift their content strategies? Justin, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, well, as an operator with a particularly young audience, thinking about an integrated media strategy that engages the players while they're consuming the sport, while also betting on the sport, while sharing that sport socially with their friends, that's a minimum for us. It's not something that we have to think about as maybe a part of our integrated strategy. We'll be getting more into streaming or media, but it's the product. It's a part of the consumer expectation before they even show up at our front door. So we're already thinking ahead to how that we're going to provide integration with the ways they're consuming content streamed now, and how we're going to continue to evolve our products to meet that expectation as the streaming networks grow and the places that people are consuming content are in even more formats and more time lengths and more forms of engagement around the content.
Yeah, I mean, to follow up on that briefly, what are some of the areas where you found success recently?
Well, in particular, with Unikrn, our video games and esports focused betting operator, we have players that are placing bets while, just like mentioned a few panels ago, watching the esports played out live. And on top of that, because we offer a set of skill products and we're offering those products to players of those games themselves, they're not just watching the most professional esports and placing those bets in real time, but they're also watching their favorite influencer streamer who plays a game they like, that they look up to and they think is fun and funny to watch or listen to and hang out around. And in many cases, we see a lot of demand for people to also just bet on what those players are doing. In fact, in the very last presentation, we saw an example of that for a live casino environment. But that's something that when we think about the video games first audience, we want to be able to replicate across all types of video game experiences, casino, skill-based wagering amongst friends, et cetera.
I think where we've seen probably the most success with combining the betting content experience with a operator and media has been our NBA Betcast that we've done with them. So, you as a user of NBA TV, you can have the opportunity to choose a stream that might be betting focused, a stream that might be props focused, a stream that might be DFS focused, and having that Betcast that we produce for them that's a really betting centric experience, and you as a user can select that. I think, as we talked about earlier with media companies are cautious, but it's also important that you have to be cautious with consumers who might not want a full L-bar experience with nothing but data and information to inform a sports bettor. Because, another reality here in the US is live betting is much bigger in Europe than it is here. That will change over time for lots of reasons. We do believe that live betting will become a more important part of the user experience, but it really works in concert with these rights holders to create a immersive experience that incorporates betting content with the viewing experience.
And kind of speaking to this idea of sort of cultivating content in a place for this specific gambling focused audience, we did see, FanDuel TV has been brought up in a couple of panels. Do you think we'll see more books go this route of creating their own streaming services, their own TV networks, or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, in an absolute sense, I think you will see someone other than FanDuel at least, try to get into it. I think the reality for, getting into a TV business is it's really hard. It's much easier to do some media elements, like have a blog or generate an app, or in the case of FanDuel TV, repurpose or evolve their pay TV horse racing network in TVG, and add some sports content around the horse racing. It's much harder to build a network, and certainly I think you'll see with the sort of evolution and consumption of content shifting towards streaming, I think you'll see some folks try to get in, but it's, like we said, a bit of a risky endeavor. You've got to be really thoughtful and have the right strategy and, conviction around your strategy to commit to it ahead of getting the distribution. And so I think it's something you probably will see somebody come in and try to do something, but I think the real question is, what's the strategy? Can they be successful? And how are they executing?
I would totally agree with that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that strategy is the key question here, right? So in the US right now, who's making a ton of money? Firstly, it's a duopoly, as Robin just pointed out here, in terms of the sports betting scene, in terms of that, the major money's there. But outside the top 5 or 6, where's the real money being made? So if you go into this and you're procuring content or you're commissioning content in order to stream, you have to be taking that budget from somewhere else, right? You have to be taking it from marketing or product development or something, or unless you've got an unlimited budget, which those days have kind of gone, right? So your strategy is really critical, right? Where are you taking that money from, and what are you using that for? That would be my question.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, content's expensive. It's an added piece of overhead, and if you're going to choose to lean into content, you might as well take that much control and have that much influence over the result, so that you can learn some of the questions that I think a lot of people are trying to learn right now as it relates to the intersection of media, betting. Are we making betting better with content, or are we making content better because betting is an available form of engagement? But when you take on an approach where you're running your own channel and producing your own content, you can test and learn those types of things on a daily basis.
I would say vertical integration does not always make sense. If you're taking, clearing, and processing bets on an event that you're commenting on, that's not necessarily the cleanest environment for what you're looking at here. I mean, I'd hate to think what the analogy could be in the stock environment. If NASDAQ clears bets, creates content, and is commenting on the environment, I think hopefully you can sort of separate the lines of the two. But in addition to just trying to lessen the cost of consumer acquisition, which I totally get that media is an important thing to do, the lines between commenting on a game and taking bets and clearing and processing is a little bit hairy.
Well, to that point, we've seen, media or sports betting companies see how hard the content business is, but we've also seen media companies realize how difficult running a sports book actually is. Do you think it's easier for a media company to become a betting company, or for a betting company to become a media company?
I might tweak the answer to your question a little. I think it's easier for a betting company to do some media elements and aspects. I don't know that any company, even FanDuel, which has its own TV network, is truly like a media company. I think they would admit that they're a betting company first. And I think in general, that inside-out approach is what has worked in the US. Inside out meaning having a brand, having a database, and sort of incrementally extending yourself out to a wider and wider audience using content and promotions, versus the outside-in model of trying to necessarily work with a media website or kind of collection of social media platforms to then try to get people authorized in. It's obviously a good way to refer users, but they do have to give their social security number. They do have to put down real money, so there is a barrier to entry. And I think there is obviously going to be some friction in the experience relative to having that brand and database and building outward.
That's right, and you got a picture sort of on both sides from your time at FanDuel, now being on SportsGrid as well, so you've sort of seen how both sides of this can play out.
Correct.
I think also, let's go back to the money as well. So if you've got an existing revenue stream as a media owner, and it's relatively inexpensive to procure a sports book. not own the technology, but go and license one from someone and have a go. You can control your marketing spend. You can put as many people into it as you want. You can try converting your audience from your existing channels over to something. So you've already got an existing revenue stream. If you start as a sportsbook, you've got your own technology to build that content. To your point, is very expensive, and you're building an audience. Then you're going through that whole acquisition piece. And I think in the UK we have two good examples of where that's worked and hasn't worked. Obviously Sky Bet. I don't know if anyone knows Sky Bet, and there's Sky TV over in the UK. That brand association, they're actually different companies, but the brand association worked really well, and they were able to, as a TV company, deploy Sky Bet and do really well. It's a really sophisticated business, and it has really sophisticated in-house technology and really good partnerships. They've done really well. You look at something like Sunbets, which is News Corp, less good, less well executed, same sort of challenges. So again, strategy comes into it, but the execution, how you go about that's critical, really.
To that point, I think Sky Bet has been held up for a while as like a really great example of what this can ultimately become, but we haven't really seen that work out or come to fruition, at least in the US market. Is there something just inherently different about the two markets that makes that kind of experience more challenging, or have things just, with phones and the second screen experience, has it evolved so much to the level where maybe that's not the, perfect or ideal experience for the next 10 years or so?
I just don't think we've seen anybody truly replicate the Sky Bet model of like having a network and a betting arm tied together. We've seen some operators in the US invest in content, but not really networks, right, that are airing live events and having shoulder programming and having the wide distribution and reach to be able to touch people all the time. So, I think it's still TBD if that model can, the Sky Bet model can really work in the US, but the versions of it that we've seen, I think, have worked to varying degrees.
I don't think brand is very important for the success of sportsbooks. Smart bettors, and increasingly over time, all bettors hopefully will become more sophisticated and smarter, care about two things: price and odds. So this notion that Sky, because I use my remote control and I'm going to use it this is the best place to place bets and nothing will ever replace that. Maybe some AI interface and I can talk to an interface and make bets. But the reality is that bettor is going to have 5 or 6 apps on their phone and they're going to find what the best price and odds are. And it's less about, unfortunately, user experience and more about, again, price and odds and brand.
I absolutely agree that for the smartest punters out there, brand is not that important. But if, however, it was an operator who aimed at becoming a media company and making that a viable part of their overall customer offering, I would say they at least have advantage if they're one of the stronger brands, because running a content business is choosing to be a destination, a place where people spend a little bit different type of time than bettors do, because to your point, they're going where the best odds are.
Yeah, I think a great example of this is Barstool and Penn. I think if you look at the value of Barstool, it's probably worth considerably more than they paid. But is it doing what they asked it to do in that acquisition, considering where they are in all of the markets that they're in? We'll see if Massachusetts, their sort of home turf, which is also DraftKings' home turf, will be a big opportunity. But that's one where I would say the promise of the investment to convert customers for Penn Barstool book has probably not worked as well as just driving the aggregate value of the asset.
I would agree and disagree with the brand aspect as well. That I think you're right in that ultimately the name of the brand is not important, but the brand experience I think is quite important. And I've got plenty of friends that are reasonable gamblers. They have a punt relatively regularly, and we all have our own favourite app, and we're not doing it. We could go and chase the odds. We could go and look and see where the sharp money is, and we could do all of those things. But actually, I use Paddy Power, and my friend uses Sky Bet, and my other friend, swears by Bet365. They're all reasonably informed individuals, So what we're doing, what I'm doing, is I'm looking at the brand experience, and I know where everything is on Paddy Power, and I'm lazy. I don't really care because I'm having a punt on something, the rugby or the football or the cricket, on a Saturday afternoon with my mates. So I think I don't care that it's Paddy Power, but I do care about the brand experience. The thing that I'm interfacing with is quite important, I think.
Well, use Action. We can very simply provide you with all the best odds, all the best prices, all the best markets, and all the best offers, and make it really simple.
Well, to the point that you just brought up, Andy, of loyalty, and everyone having sort of their favorite experience, a lot of the streaming services and the sports books are having similar challenges, right? In terms of their business model, they're all trying to acquire customers. When we think specifically about sports-focused streaming services where the rights tend to be very fragmented across different platforms, they're looking to build loyalty, right? So a lot of the challenges are the same across these businesses. What can streaming companies learn from sports betting companies and vice versa?
That's probably a good one for you, right?
That's a tough one. So I was at Twitch for the last several years prior to just becoming a gambling operator. I'm the new guy at betting, so a lot of my context for this question comes from that time. One of the biggest challenges I've faced in the last year entering into operating a betting company is I have all these lines on the map that all of a sudden matter when I've been a part of a company that's, as discussed a couple panels ago, provided esports globally for free to as many people as possible, and that helped grow that entire industry. And now all of a sudden in betting we have all these lines and restrictions for who's actually our customer and when they're allowed to be their customer based on where they are. I think that's an immediate challenge when you think about, as a sports book, how to produce content that matters to people, and whether you can even see the typical ROI that either content licensing or content production requires to be successful. So that's one thing that just has to be considered. And whether or not you're going to be able to sustain that content business as a content business model that lives on top of your sports betting business model, where your unit economics make sense based on that, or it can truly be marketing overhead because it drives sports betting business. But then as it relates to a media company looking at sports betting companies for where they might learn something, I think, just driving consumer engagement. Media companies are also challenged OTTs, streaming platforms like Twitch, YouTube, also very challenged because content licensing is extremely expensive. Advertising is not always as reliable form of revenue when you consider that 50% of the people watching are blocking advertisements. And then there's typically like a commerce business on top, but it's really hard to innovate in that space. On Twitch and in YouTube in particular, you have subscriptions, but that's a monthly occurrence. How do you get the daily, every time somebody tunes in and watches, transaction out of a customer to make that content ROI grow? That's really difficult. But in gambling, that's actually the type of ways we do transact with our customers, like consistently and often and in increments. So if I in either set of shoes, those are maybe some of the things I would be looking to the other side to learn about.
Right, and we have seen some networks, some platforms implement things like free-to-play games to try to engage people, both around the live action in a game, but also other events sort of around that in a free-to-play micro betting, whatever capacity.
Yeah, I think also you've got your geographical lines, but you've got your age as well. So I think media companies obviously don't have that. They don't have that age limit, that lower age limit to market to. They can have products to all sorts of ages, so they can teach the gaming companies something about an emerging audience that the gaming companies can't get to. They're not allowed to get to them, so they don't know anything about them. We talked about what does the younger generation want. More granular content, access to innovative interfaces and experiences. New devices that are coming on. All these things that are but. There's a recent report that says in Generation Z that we assume that everything happens on mobile, but 80% of that market of Generation Z has the mobile, but they also watch the TV as well, long-form content on TV. So we're just making an assumption that it's all short-form content, but it's not. 80% are still watching long-form content, they're still engaging with that, and 66% have a TV in their bedroom in the US. Right. So yeah, I think
I'd say one last thing on the Amazon not experiment. They put a lot of dollars in, billions. Year one NFL was really interesting. Unfortunately, they had a lot of crappy games, and those crappy games. Why are you watching the Titans Dolphins in the fourth quarter when it's 30-5? I think we know why people are watching. So Amazon laid in tons of data and tons of additional user experience around data that I thought was really, really innovative and I think going to be interesting. And if we get the NFL to be a little bit more comfortable with betting, I think you'll start to see these experiences on television and on streaming platforms become much richer with an experience that's driven towards at least giving the taste to a sports bettor that's going to keep them around for a crappy game.
That's a great point. It'll be interesting to see what Apple does too with the MLS experience as they sort of build that out and as we see more rights in general shift over to streaming. And I cannot believe we're already at time. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.